welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic that's come up from one of you, SAP.
That's right. Big topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So whether you've maybe bumped into it at work or, this is totally new territory, we're going to explore what this whole enterprise software thing is about. Really start from scratch.
Mm-hmm. The idea is to get to the core of it, figure out why it's, well, so important for so many companies, and what it actually means if you wanted to, say, learn it.
And we've got a recording, right? An intro session on SAP.
Yep, that's our main source material. Think of this as getting the essentials from that session. We'll unpack what makes SAP tick.
Okay, great. So let's jump right in. First thing, and this is kind of interesting, from the source is actually how you say it.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic starting point.
Right. It's not SAP. Forget saying it like a word.
No, definitely not.
You have to spell it out. SAP?
Every time, SAP.
Apparently saying I took in SAP course is, well, it just doesn't sound right in that world.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
So, takeaway number one, spell it. SAP.
Got it. SAP. And what do those letters actually stand for?
Okay, so it's systems, applications, and products in data processing.
Ah, okay. Systems, applications, products in data processing.
Exactly. So, at its heart, it's about using these integrated systems, different software applications, and various products to handle data efficiently inside a company. That's the core idea.
Okay, makes sense. Data processing. Now, the source then calls SAP an ERP package. ERP, another one.
Yep, another acronym for you. Enterprise Resource Planning.
Enterprise Resource Planning. And the key word there seems to be planning.
Absolutely. Planning is central. SAP essentially helps big organizations figure out the smartest way to use everything they have, their resources, to meet their goals.
Okay, planning resources. The source uses an analogy, right? Something about a household budget.
Yeah, it's quite relatable. Imagine a dad asking his kid to sort out the family budget for the next 2 months while he's away.
Okay.
Even for just a family, predicting everything. It's tough, right? Maybe the washing machine breaks or a friend visits unexpectedly.
Or you suddenly want to buy a course online. Yeah. Things pop up.
Exactly. So if planning for a household is tricky,
then planning for a huge company, an enterprise, with maybe offices all over the place, that's a whole different level of complexity.
Immense complexity. They need to carefully manage their resources.
Right. And what counts as a resource in this business context?
Pretty much anything the company uses. So manpower, the people, their skills, machinery, equipment, money, obviously cash, investments, raw materials they need to make stuff.
All the moving parts.
All of it. Everything needs to be planned and managed so the whole operation runs smoothly.
Okay. And this leads into another example from the source, the bank loan one. That was interesting.
Ah, yes, the 200 crore documents for a 100 crore loan.
Yeah. And even with a recommendation from someone important.
Yeah.
Seems like a slam dunk, right? Just give them a loan.
Well, not so fast. That's where the planning comes in. It highlights the risk of, putting all your resources in one place.
Ah, okay. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Even if the paperwork looks perfect, a bank can't just lend out all its money to one person or company. They've got their own costs, right? Rent, salaries, electricity.
Operating cost.
And there's always the risk that the loan won't be paid back. Bad debt.
So it's about managing that risk through planning.
Precisely. It connects directly back to that P in ERP planning. The source explains how the bank could spread the risk.
How so?
By diversifying. They wouldn't just give out one huge loan. They'd allocate funds across different loan types. Maybe some for farming, some for housing, gold loans, car loans, personal loans.
Spreading it out.
Yeah, and probably allocating different amounts based on how risky they think each category is. Maybe personal loans get a smaller slice of the pie, for example.
Okay, I see. So that bank example really shows why this resource planning is so vital for any big organization.
Absolutely. And SAP provides the tools to do this kind of planning really effectively. The source even mentions aiming for something like 99% accuracy. So fundamentally, SAP is this big toolkit, a collection of applications designed to help businesses plan and manage all their resources. That's what an ERP package does.
Right. So if someone's listening and thinking, okay, I'm interested in learning this SAP thing, where would they even start? It sounds huge.
It can seem that way. Our source breaks down learning SAP into 3 main areas, really.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's the system itself that's like the administration, the technical backbone. Second, the applications, the software modules for different business tasks. And this splits into technical and functional roles.
Okay, system application.
And third, understanding the package as a whole, how all these bits fit and work together.
Right. That sounds like a lot to get your head around. The source mentioned something about people jumping into SAP courses without really knowing what they're getting into.
Yeah, apparently it's quite common. The speaker in our source even shared a personal story about getting into SAP just because a friend suggested it, without really understanding it first. It really highlights, the need to know what you're signing up for.
Definitely. And why are people so interested? Are there common reasons?
Well, yeah, there are a couple of big perceptions. One is definitely the pay. There's a strong belief that SAP jobs often pay more than other software roles at a similar level.
Okay, money's a motivator.
Always is, isn't it? And the other thing is about ABA.
ABAP. That's the SAP programming language.
One of them, yes, the core one. And the perception is that ABAP might be, well, easier to pick up for beginners compared to languages like Java or .NET.
Interesting. Okay, let's dig into those learning paths. The system-side administration. What's involved there?
People usually call this basis and securities. Basis is essentially the technical foundation, installing SAP, keeping it running smoothly, maintenance, that sort of thing.
The plumbing.
Kind of, yeah. And security is about protecting the system, controlling who gets access to what. Our source suggests these courses typically run for maybe 45 to 60 days.
And no programming involved.
Generally not for basis, no.
But there was a catch, wasn't there? Something about what they teach versus the real world.
Yes. This is crucial. A lot of training places teach SAP installation and admin on Windows. It's familiar, user-friendly.
Makes sense for training.
The vast majority of big companies, the source says maybe 90% run their SAP systems on Unix or Linux.
What's that?
Mostly for security and stability. They're considered more robust for these big enterprise systems.
So learning basis on Windows might not fully prepare you.
Exactly. If you're serious about a basis career, you absolutely need to learn Unix or Linux too. That's a key takeaway from the source.
Good to know. What about the job prospects for basis admins?
Well, the source points out that while basis is essential, you often don't need a huge team of basis administrators on a single project. Maybe just 2 or 3 people working shifts to cover 24/7 support.
So fewer roles compared to other areas.
Potentially, yes. It's a viable path, but maybe not as many openings as in, say, the application side.
Okay, let's move to that application area then.
Right.
You mentioned a split.
Huh.
Technical and functional. Let's start with functional. What does that mean?
Functional roles are all about understanding the business processes and configuring SAP to match them. Think about different departments: sales, purchasing, finance, HR.
Right.
SAP has specific modules for these. The source lists quite a few. SD for sales and distribution, MM for materials management, like buying stuff and tracking inventory, FI for finance, HR for human resources.
Okay, lots of modules.
Oh, yeah. PP for production planning, QM for quality management, CRM for customer relationship management. The list goes on. The source mentioned around 67 modules in total, even covering specific industries like oil and gas or real estate.
Wow, 67. How do you even choose one?
Often your background gives you a clue. Someone with a finance degree, like an MCM, might naturally look at SAP FICO Finance and Controlling.
FICO. That rings a bell.
Very common, yeah. An MBA in HR might go for SAP HR, Marketing MBA, maybe SAP SD.
So you align it with your existing expertise.
That's often the best way. And importantly, the source stresses you typically don't need programming skills for these functional consultant roles. It's more about understanding the business process and how to set up SAP for it.
Are some modules more in demand than others?
Well, the source calls FICO an evergreen module.
Evergreen? Why?
Simple reason. Every single company needs to manage its finances, right? Accounting, reporting, controlling costs. It's universal.
True. Every business needs finance.
So there's always a steady demand for people who know SAP FICO. It's like the financial core of the business in SAP.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's flip to the technical side of applications. You mentioned ABA earlier.
Yes, ABAP, Advanced Business Application Programming. According to our source, this is huge. Like 90% of SAP's core functionality runs on ABA code.
90%? Wow.
Yeah. Then you have things like HANA, which is SAP's database technology. That's maybe 10%. And UI5 or Fiori, which are for the user interface, the web stuff, also maybe 10%.
So ABP is really the engine room.
Pretty much. And the point the source makes is that you really need to understand that core ABP foundation before you can effectively work with HANA or build those fancy UI5 interfaces.
So just learning HANA or UI5 on its own isn't really practical for getting a developer job.
That seems to be the message. You need to understand the underlying ABA logic, how the data is processed in the back end, to be truly useful in most SAP development roles.
Okay, so let's say someone's thinking, all right, maybe ABP is for me.
Yeah.
Do they need to be a coding whiz already, like no C++ or Java?
That's a really common question, and the source is quite clear. No, you absolutely don't.
Really?
Yeah, the analogy used is learning human languages. You don't need to know French to learn Spanish, right? They're different systems.
That's the point.
Same idea with ABA. It's its own language.
The source also used an analogy about a baby learning language.
Right. Through observation and listening. The idea is you can learn ABA from scratch by paying close attention, observing how it's done, listening carefully during teaching. You're basically immersing yourself in this new language for talking to the SAP system.
Okay, so it's learnable from zero programming background, but how do programs even work fundamentally? The source mentioned the IPO cycle.
Ah, yes. IPO. Input, process, output. It's the basic model for pretty much any computer program.
Input, process, output. Okay.
It takes some data, input, does something with it based on the code, process, and then produces a result, output. Simple concept, but fundamental.
Makes sense. But then there was a question. Input, process, output. Which one is the most important?
Yeah, the source posed that. The analogy was the heart and the brain. Both vital, obviously. But if the heart stops, things get critical immediately. Applying that to IPO, the argument is that input is the most critical starting point.
Because without input,
the program has nothing to process, it can't do anything, you need the ingredients before you can bake the cake.
right, the ingredients. The source used an example with like milk, sugar, coffee powder.
Exactly. You have these inputs, and you could potentially make lots of different things, tea, coffee, whatever. But just having the inputs isn't enough.
You need the process, the recipe.
Precisely. You need to know the steps to turn those inputs into the specific output you want. And then the source asked, okay, if I tell you how to make tea and give you the ingredients, can everyone actually do it successfully?
Probably not everyone perfectly the first time.
Right, which leads to the importance of observation. You need to watch, understand the nuances, not just know the steps intellectually.
So being observant is key for a developer.
Absolutely vital, according to the source. And this ties directly into the very first critical phase of any actual SAP project.
Which is?
Understanding what the client actually wants. Phase 1, requirement gathering.
Talking to the client.
Deeply understanding their business, their problems, what they need the system to achieve. Without that clear picture, you can't figure out the inputs, you can't design the process. You're lost.
It's like trying to build that house without asking the owner what they want.
Exactly. And clients might not always be clear, so you need to ask the right questions.
Okay, so you gather the requirements. What's next? Phase 2.
Phase 2 is creating the business blueprint. Think of it like a detailed proposal or quotation.
What's in it?
It spells out exactly what the SAP system will do for the client based on those requirements. It gives estimated timelines for getting it built, and internally it includes the budget.
And developers help with those timelines.
Yes, they contribute based on how complex they think the technical work will be. The source used an analogy here too.
The lunch one.
Yeah. Your friend asks for lunch with specific things. You need to figure out how long it'll take based on getting the ingredients, cooking time, etc. Same idea for estimating development time.
Makes sense. Blueprint agreed. Then what?
Phase 3, development. This is where the abap coders, the developers, actually build the solution based on that blueprint.
Right, the coding phase. And after development comes testing.
Yes, the testing phase. But interestingly, the source mentioned that in SAP, it's often not a completely separate team. Often, the developers themselves are responsible for testing their own code thoroughly, making sure it works, meets the requirements, finding and fixing any bugs.
So learning ABA means learning to test and debug too.
Definitely. You need to know how to check your work and fix problems.
Okay. And then after testing?
The source briefly mentioned go live. That's when the client actually starts using the new system. And then support, which is handling any issues that pop up after go live, ongoing maintenance.
So requirement gathering, blueprint development, testing, go live, support. That's the whole life cycle.
Pretty much, yeah. Understanding that whole flow gives context to why you're learning specific things in SAP.
So if someone does decide to learn ABA, how long should they expect a good course to take? The source had thoughts on this.
It did. The suggestion was around 100 hours, or maybe 100 classes, assuming roughly an hour per class.
100 hours.
Yeah. And it strongly warned against those super short, like 1-month crash courses.
Oh, why? Not enough.
The argument is they can only really give you an outline. You won't get the depth needed for actual real-time project work. It compared it to trying to learn Java properly in just a month. It's just not realistic for true proficiency.
Need time to absorb it all. What about experience? Is SAP only for people who've been working for years?
Another common perception, but the source pushes back on that.
How so?
By mentioning big companies like Accenture or IBM, they often have targets or quotas for hiring freshers, recent graduates.
Ah, so there are entry-level opportunities.
Yes, though they might not always be advertised explicitly as fresher jobs. A lot happens through campus recruitment drives.
Okay, and the source compared the U.S. and Indian markets for freshers.
Yeah, a slight difference in perspective, perhaps. Post-COVID, the U.S. market might be a bit more hesitant about hiring completely fresh grads, maybe worried about immediate performance.
Whereas in India,
In India, where cost-cutting can be a bigger driver, there tend to be more openings and willingness to train freshers in SAP.
interesting dynamics.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've danced around it, but let's formally define ABAP again. Advanced Business Application Programming. And it's a fourth-generation language.
Right. Which basically means it's designed to be closer to human language, more user-friendly than older languages.
How so?
It uses English-like commands, keywords. So if you understand English well, you can generally follow the logic.
Makes it more accessible.
Potentially, yes. And remember that IPO cycle. Input, process, output. ABAP programs follow that. They take data, process it using the code you write, and produce some kind of output, maybe a report or updating records in the system.
Okay, great. Let's create and wrap up the main takeaways from this deep dive. SAP, it's an ERP system. Enterprise Resource Planning.
Helping businesses plan and manage their resources effectively.
And crucially, always spell it out. SAP.
Don't say SAP.
Got it. And the learning paths are broadly system admin spaces, functional roles like FICO, SD, MM, HR, and technical roles, mainly focusing on ABAP programming.
Exactly. And for ABAP, you don't necessarily need prior coding experience.
But what is crucial, according to our source,
Really understanding the client's needs, being observant, and getting a handle on that whole project lifecycle we discussed. Requirement gathering, blueprinting, development, testing, all the way to support.
right. So for you listening, as you think about all this, maybe consider how this idea of planning resources or the different roles needed in a complex system like SAP might apply elsewhere in your life or work.
Or perhaps you're now curious about one of those specific functional modules, FICO, HR, SD, maybe one aligns with your background. That could be a neat path for further exploration.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive into the world of SAP with us.